All right, very good. So we skip ahead a couple years. We're back in it's Switzerland in New York City is Lodger, but this really bizarre artsy experimental world-ish album, Lodger. Frostbite, what do you think?
This is probably the one I'm least familiar with out of all the ones we're going to talk about today. And I mean, I've heard a lot of these tracks before, but watching your video, going back through them, they must have not made much of an impact because, like, I recognize the names of the songs, but listening through them again, I almost didn't recognize them. I would say the only one that I've went back to on this album any number of times is Boys Keep Swinging. I listen to that one semi regularly. I like that one. That one's pretty good. But all the rest of them, for the most part, aren't anything that I ever make an effort to go back and listen to again.
Sure. What about you, Shiftless?
It's my favorite in the Berlin trilogy, most definitely. But
wow,
again, I don't
bold claim.
Yeah, that's really controversial thing to say.
I know it's a controversial thing, but
explain yourself.
Now, explain yourself.
I don't know. I tend to like messier things from an artist, like not necessarily their most cohesive stuff, because I think that usually shows the most diverse side of their creativity, and I think this definitely shows a part of it. Especially because I like that part of, like, excluding the world influences, which is really weird in the album in general. Like, Bowie definitely taking a more mainstream approach in this more than ever. And I really appreciate that coming from him because I think his sense of like pop appeal is really great, especially when Boys Keep Swinging and Look Back in Anger and stuff of that nature. One thing I wanted to bring up though that I didn't realize was I think in your review you mentioned the Talking Heads connection.
Yeah.
And I never really thought of that because there is such a weird overlap if you listen to parts of like Fear of Music and Remain in Light, where there does feel more of a thread there than I think most people ever realize.
I haven't listened to much else from Talking Heads aside from Remain in Light, but as far as Lodger in 1979 being like a world album, is there really anything like eccentrically world that people had done before this in any big way?
There's like Paul Simon albums and certain like singer-songwriter albums that kind of expose that sensibility, but not like this.
Graceland was like mid-'80s, right? I think.
I'm also thinking of Peter Gabriel's which I know is like 84 or 85.
Yeah, so this might be one of the first like big, really eccentric world albums to kind of, come on the scene. And like, I don't know how much it informed Remain in Light, but I definitely I feel similar vibes from both albums. I think they're not similar, I should say, but I definitely I get the same kind of atmosphere.
There's a
I suppose
to those albums. Like, I don't think it's necessarily a musical similarity as much as a mental state of like what they want to produce.
Sure. Rolf, what about you?
To be honest, I can't remember any song from this album besides Boys Keep Swinging, DJ, and Repetition. I have it on vinyl from Yugoslavia, and I remember I listened to it quite a lot, but I can't remember any other song from it.
That's great. Yeah, I like even after listening to it, and I'll again readily admit that I just have not gone back to this. I remember Yes As In. I remember a bit of Night Flight. I know Look Back in Anger because I've heard that a few times. I can't remember what any other song sounds like.
Yeah,
just off the top of my head.
Maybe Fantastic Voyage, there is something like that there, but nothing more. And I completely agree with what Rickenbacker wrote. Lodger seems like a build-up to Scary Monsters. Yeah, I can definitely hear a build-up to Scary Monsters in Lodger, from what I remember at least, from Lodger.
He says, I see Lodger as the man who sold the world, but it's just all over the place. DJ is really catchy, and I think he did reggae at some point there. It's a great album. It's also quite weird, which is why I love that album quite a bit. And I can see why that, like, I can see this album being one of the more severely underrated albums of his. But I think the issue for me is just that it's not really a cohesion problem so much as like it feels so messy that like I can't come to it as an album. It's just like I have to kind of pick the songs I like and then leave, because again, it kind of just feels like a transition, you know? It kind of feels like it's going from Heroes, and then you just had to like make this crazy insane album, and then we get like a much more straightforward one later. So,
Maybe it's something like Young Americans between Diamond Dogs and Station to Station.
It could be. I know it was a drastic change when I went from, what was it, Aladdin Sane to Station to Station, because I was, hopping several albums, but it definitely felt like there needed to be kind of a trajectory to get there. But yeah, and then next year, 1980, we get Scary Monsters and Super Creeps. This is a much more straightforward. It's still kind of artsy. It's still a little experimental. But there definitely is a more mainstream pop appeal to it, I think. But what do you think, Frostbite?
I would say the same, but I mean, I think it's a much more solid album all around as well. I mean, I probably revisit songs off this more than I do all the way back to Station. There's a few tracks on Station to Station, the Berlin trilogy, that I revisit, but there's a few tracks on here that, like Ashes to Ashes is probably one of the Bowie songs I listen to the most, and I listen to Fashion quite a bit. But then Scary Monsters, the title track, and is also really good. I mean, I think this whole album, is a really solid album, especially just stepping into the beginning of the 80s. And I would say, its last really experimental kind of quirky kind of album still before he went, pretty much mainstream pop on his next album with Let's Dance.
Sure. What do you think, Shiftless?
I mean, I like Let's Dance just on the basis of him just trying to do the super pop thing and actually giving him some success, because sadly the Berlin trilogy didn't sell much at all.
Right.
But,
Yeah, this got pretty high on a lot of charts.
Yeah. But as far as Scary Monsters, like, it was funny because this was probably the album I heard the most of as far as discovering Bowie, because there was like a lot of mythos of stuff from Ashes to Ashes and Fashion and Scary Monsters. So when I finally came into it, it was kind of really cathartic for me to discover, like, oh, this is a lot of where people kind of get their imagery of Bowie to me.
Mm-hmm.
And
sure,
I really appreciated a lot of it, because to me it felt like he was still both ahead of the game and still a part of his time. So it really was a rewarding album, especially like tracks like Teenage, Wildlife, or Fashion. So I come to really appreciate all of this album.
Yeah, and this is really like, he hasn't done anything quite like mainstream ready that wasn't like 100% forward thinking since like Aladdin Sane, arguably. Because like, or I should say, I haven't listened to him, but like Diamond Dogs and Young Americans, like once he went Station to Station up through Lodger, he was just like pushing the envelope constantly. And then this seems kind of like a return to form, something a little more palatable for a majority of people, but it still had that Bowie flair, I guess you could say. Ralph, what do you think?
I think Scary Monsters is a build-up to Let's Dance. It's definitely feel more poppier than Lodger, and to be honest, I think Frostbite said, Berlin Trilogy didn't sell very well, and from what I've heard, RCA was really pushing on Bowie to make it more poppier, less experimental. From what I've heard from Michael Rotter, the guitarist of Noi, Bowie wanted to get him to record low, but guys from RCA said to Michel that Bowie is not interested, and the guys from RCA told Bowie that Rotter is not interested. So I think everybody, I think RCA was pushing Bowie to make his music more popular again, to just sell. And I like Scary Monsters a lot, actually. It's type of album that I don't remember a bad song, definitely, or even a so-so song from it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely feel like it's more, it's an improvement to Lodger in a lot of ways for me. It's hard for me to say if it's better just because like I just cannot pinpoint Lodger at all. I don't know how I feel about it as an album, but just personally, like this is definitely more palatable to me. I think that there's a lot more interesting songs here, I guess you could say. Not to say that Lodger isn't interesting, because it certainly is, but I don't know. This is definitely a unique one. It seems kind of how do I put it? It kind of just, it doesn't feel like a very unique statement or a very like bold statement. It seems like Bowie's playing it more safe than he has, that since, you know, things like Aladdin Sane or Young Americans or whatever. It feels almost, you know, like vanilla music, you know, I guess you could call it. But there definitely is a Bowie flair to it. So in a way, after something as forward thinking as the Berlin trilogy, this almost flies under the radar, I guess you could say. But it certainly is great. I think it's great.
I mean,
I think it just misses people, I suppose. I don't know. Do I feel alone in that?
I mean, I think I don't know if people specifically feel that about this specific album, but I guess as the transition into the 80s, I would say even a lot of Bowie fans would agree, because most fans don't like the majority of his output throughout the 80s, because he became, with Let's Dance was when he hit real big, and then he felt, and he's even said in later on in interviews throughout the 80s, because most of his 80s stuff is not very good.
Oh yeah,
but
Never Let Me Down. Oh god.
But it was after he even said in interviews that after the success of Let's Dance, he felt pressured by the public of how he was going to follow it up. How was he going to keep the popularity, and after he achieved it, and so most of his 80s output is very forgettable.
Yeah, I found it kind of funny that before I put a couple extra albums in, the people in the stream convinced me to go from Scary Monsters all the way to Blackstar, and I'm like, geez, guys, like,
I mean,
like,
to be honest, it's gonna be a bold statement. I didn't really listen to Bowie after Let's Dance. To be honest, I listened to Never Let Me Down, and I was just no, okay, thank you. I listened to Outside a little, and then Blackstar, of course, and the next day. But there is a big gap between Never Let Me Down and basically the next day that I didn't listen. And I'm not ashamed of it, really, because I think he was struggling back in that time to just find something, some kind of genre to go.
You know, I'm looking at Tonight and Never Let Me Down on Wikipedia, and I'm just kind of looking at the rating scores, and I'm feeling like here on this Discord we need to have like a little listening party of some kind, and just kind of and just play some of these. But yeah, did I get everyone's did I skip someone? Did everyone get their thoughts in on Scary Monsters? I can't remember who I left. Did everyone say it?
Got everyone.
I think so.
Okay. So yeah, after that is Let's Dance, which is another album that I'll probably get to at some point. But then yeah, Tonight, Never Let Me Down, and then there's the 2 Tin Machine albums. I know very little about this project. I know it's a supergroup, right?
Yeah, well, the Tin Machine was kind of, they're just kind of straight ahead. It's just straight ahead rock. It's none of, if you first listen to it, you probably wouldn't think it's Bowie albums, because when he did the Tin Machine project, he wanted a full band feel. So they're not Bowie project. The songs were written as a collective, as the whole band. So he didn't even want to be, the front man of the band. I don't even think he sings all the songs on them.
Here, let me get Rickenbacker before we fully move on. Fashion is an interesting track. Bowie was always looking ahead and planning albums beforehand. That's a brave thing to say. I don't know what that was in reference to.
About me, the
Oh,
whole,
okay.
yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Let's Dance is underrated. Please don't hurt me.
I would say it's
don't know.
overrated.
It seems like because I've heard, which tracks have I heard? Modern Love and Let's Dance. I don't like the track Let's Dance. Modern Love is okay. It plays at work, so I have to hear it all the time.
What about China Girl? You've heard that one, right?
No, I haven't.
That's with Stevie Ray Vaughan, right?
Yeah, so he played on that album.
Okay.
I prefer
Stevie Ray Vaughan on guitar, it says. And
I would say I used to be very critical of Let's Dance as kind of like a sellout to pop music, but I would say that the songs from the album have actually grown on me a lot. Like they're not my favorites still, but I if they come on, I enjoy listening to them. I think they're just fun tracks, you know.
Cool. So yeah, we're skipping over the other two weak 80s albums. Then we have the Tin Machine.
The one thing about Let's Dance I just want to add, to be honest,
sure.
I think it's cool album. I listen to it quite a lot, but it's this sort of album that doesn't leave me with something. I just listen to it, okay, fine, and that's it. It's like it says nothing really. It's just pop, and it's really fun to listen, but nothing more, I think, at least.
Yeah, based off of the two tracks I've heard, it doesn't seem as eccentric as Scary Monsters.
Oh,
it
definitely.
seems way more straightforward, and it even says on here that it's gone 5 times platinum. It sold 10 million worldwide, so it definitely did better than Scary Monsters did. Rickenbacker says, I only like Let's Dance song in the context of the album. Black Tie, White Noise. I know I said we would keep this stuff for keep the albums I haven't listened to after the end, but we'll just talk about the ones that I will be listening to, but I don't imagine I'll listen to Black Tie, White Noise. You guys know anything about this one?
I remember I've heard it, but I can't remember anything about it, so I have nothing to say really.
I know a couple songs off of it. Jump, they say, is one I like. I like that one. But But besides that, I'm not super familiar with all the songs on there.
Says electronic, acid jazz, soul. Interesting. Okay, so Outside, 95. I was not expecting this. I had no idea what it was until people demanded I do something of his from the 90s, and this was the most highly recommended one. It seems pretty divisive among people. Frostbite, Outside, what do you think?
Yeah, Bowie's 90 period is something that I've been slowly making my way through. And this was one of the ones was lesser familiar with. I know a few songs off of it, the single, The Heart's Filthy Lesson, and Hallow's Space Boy. And I will say that I prefer the Hallow's Space Boy remix that they did with Pet Shop Boys. But listening through this album, the album doesn't really have a lot of tracks on it that I would come back to individually. This feels like an album that if you're going to listen to, you have to listen to it as a whole, because it feels like it all goes together and nothing really stands out on its own.
Right.
It feels like if you pick one track or something out of it, you're getting like a part of the experience and not the full experience. So this would be something that, like, if I'm just listening to music, I'm probably not listening to unless like I have the time to set aside to make it through the entire album.
Sure. What about you, Shiftless?
I'm not as well versed with the album because 90s Bowie I just don't really have much experience with. But after watching your reaction, I kind of went through the album myself, and I didn't really identify with much of it, but I could tell more than anything it felt like Bowie at least had a lot of purpose in it.
Yeah.
Which I respected from that aspect, because everything is so detailed and everything is so clearly leading towards another thing. So I think for him having that artistic outlet, it's good. It just, to me, it wasn't really all that compelling.
Yeah, it took him almost a year to record the thing, and it just kind of slipped under everyone's radar. It just didn't quite hit its mark. which I found really interesting. What about you, Ralph? What do you think?
Um, Bowie in the 90s, it's not my thing really, but I like Hello Space Boy. I think that's how it's called, the song. Um, to be honest, I like this one maybe a little more than others because it's Bowie reunites with Eno, and I really like Eno, so I like the sound of it. But it's this kind of album that I never listened to it that much, like the 70s or early 80s stuff.
Rickenbacker says, I tried to listen to Outside, but it can't really grow on me. I prefer Earthling to Outside. What I just noticed here was, obviously we have Eno back again, but Reeves Gabrels is actually part of this too, who was in Tin Machine, and he's the guitarist for The Cure, isn't that right?
He was for one point.
At one point. So that's an interesting kind of, flair to this thing, but I think... yeah, like I said, I really respect the intention. I don't think it quite hit its mark. I think that this is Bowie post being in the Twin Peaks movie. And so I think that he carried a lot of that kind of stream of consciousness, kind of crime narrative into this as well. And I don't think it really works, but it's such a compelling listen. Like, I did not regret listening to it. But like, there aren't really any tracks I'd come back to, because like, if they were, it would be like Heart's Filthy Lesson and Hallow Space Boy. And to me, they just kind of feel like just barely like cringy 90s industrial. There's something like even 9 Inch Nails, like there's just something almost a little too try hard about it.
Yeah.
Not like, I'm not even really slamming it, it's just that's how I feel. But like there are tracks in here that I found really interesting, like Wishful Beginnings. Like I said, it kind of had a Suicide vibe. I'm Deranged. Strangers When We Meet is actually pretty decent as well. That was on Buddha of Suburbia. But yeah, it's a bizarre album. I don't know how I feel about it, and I don't really know if I'll ever figure out how I feel about it, and I think I'm okay with that.
I think a lot of the '90s was Bowie getting older and struggling with getting older and still trying to stay innovative and change it up, and he was picking up on a lot of the industrial stuff, and I think a lot of it's hit or miss. A lot of it's been growing on me as I listen to more of it, but once more so once he gets into the even later 90s, early 2000s stuff, it feels like he finds a little bit of a groove for a few albums.
Sure.
So I don't want to detract too much about this, but I'm kind of curious on people's input of this. Many of you know Quantic Dreams?
Oh, is that the game development studio?
Yeah, because Bowie was involved with like the making of their first game. I think it was called Omicron, and he was kind of the first big backer of it.
I'll be
right
back.
This was before Indigo Prophecy?
Yeah, this was the first game, because Indigo Prophecy would come after it. And it's funny to me,
I didn't know about this.
Of that. Yeah, him and Reeves of the Cure fame and Tin Machine were both the compositional people there, and he Bowie even does some voice acting in it. I thought it was really interesting for something.
The Hours album is the one that they did for the soundtrack for it. And actually that's one of my favorite later era Bowie albums, Hours. I think Hours is really good.
Yeah, I knew that Hours was like supposed to be like related to something else, but I didn't realize that it was like Quantic Dream's first game. That's interesting.
Hours wasn't the first Bowie album that was full digital. You could download it from internet or something like that, because I've heard something like this. I don't know if it's true or not.
Like one of the first digital download albums.
Yeah.
Bowie. He was out of the time with that, because he also sold a lot of his stock in the '90s of his albums.
Yeah, well, Bowie was like a lot of stuff. Like in the '80s, he was the first artist to release their entire back catalog on CDs when it came out. Then when the internet hit on, he was like the first artist to release an album online, and stuff like that. So he was always something new's coming out. He was like the first one to jump on it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, if you guys like want to just comment on any of these like albums between Outside and the Next Day, we have Earthling Hours, Heathen Realities, or anything that you guys think is worth commenting on with those.
I have just one thing. I have problem with this industrial 90s era because, like, I think you Alex said it, it's too cringy for me. It's just not something for me. And if I want to listen to something more industrial, I just listen to, for example, Coil Horse Rotivator. It's definitely more industrial and little less cringy than um, 9 Inch Nails. I like only Quake soundtrack from 9 Inch Nails. It's definitely something. I still remember blasting Quake. I even did it like 3 months ago. Blasting Quake with soundtrack, definitely something.
Now, like the instrumentals, the instrumental composition of industrial, I find like really cool and like badass. Like I remember, I don't remember what game commercial it was for. It's like either Halo or Gears of War, but they used, I think it's called "Just Like You Imagined," from 9 Inch Nails, and I think it's a completely instrumental track. I think it's off of the the album after Downward Spiral.
Fragile, I think, something like that.
I cannot remember. I could look it up, but I'm really lazy. But Just Like You Imagined, it's a great instrumental, like industrial track, really grindy, really rocky, and like I listened to that track all the time back when I was a kid after I saw that commercial. But like any time Trent sings over one of his songs, like except for Hurt, which is really more low key. I'm just like, oh, buddy. It's like it like like I said, it's just it kind of borderlines on cringe, and somehow Outside does the same thing, where it's like I hear the opening to Heart's Filthy Lesson, it's like doom 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 doom, I'm like okay, and then like the vocals come in, it's like oh well, that kind of like clashes against it a little bit, and now it just feels a little silly. I don't know. It's like if you're gonna go really intense, then like the vocals kind of need to match it, and I just haven't heard much industrial that does that, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan personally of the music of industrial. I think really the only saving grace for Bowie's 90 period that kind of keeps me a little bit interested in some of it is just his voice. I like the way his voice sounds, even if it doesn't even match the music. Because I don't, especially if I'm not a big fan of the music anyways, but his voice, at least I can try to vibe along with that.
Sure. So yeah,
I
that
would,
was yeah. What you got?
I was just say moving forward through the next couple albums before we jump up to all the way to Next Day. We already talked about Hours, which I would say Hours in Bowie's late period is pretty much that stride that he hits that I was talking about for a few albums, that he finds like a groove, because I think Hours is really good. And then going into 2002, Heathen, which might be my favorite, late period Bowie album before he had his comeback. I think Heathen is just really great all around. And then Reality, which in 2003 is also, those three albums right there are, I think he right before he quit because of his heart attack, I think he finally found his groove again and started putting out consistently. I think just solid albums. They weren't super crazy experimental or innovative, but they were really solid Bowie albums, and they were just offbeat enough, that they had that Bowie sound. But you could tell that as he's getting older, his voice is, changing, and he's a little deeper, and he doesn't have a lot of the edge that his younger voice had. But I think he found a way to really play into that.
Man, that Reality album cover, I cannot get over it.
Oh god, reality cover.
Like, how can you get that and think, oh, this will be a good album?
It's like when I saw the cover of Reality, I was like, what is this?
Is this a joke? Are we being trolled?
It's like, Bowie, why would you do that? Is it a soundtrack for a Barbie movie? What the hell is going on? God,
he looks like a Bratz doll.
Yeah, it's just bizarre. And when you listen to it, I like when I listen to music and I look at the cover. The sound like matches the cover. You can
yes, fully agree.
And when I listen to Reality and I look at the cover, I just don't know what's going on. Okay, it's like, why?
Yeah, I'm a huge. I may have said this in one of my like almost 50 videos at this point on reactions, but I really connect music to the cover, and
Oh yeah.
I really love when it's very intentional, you know, and it's just like it matches perfectly and it really informs the music. And sometimes it just doesn't work. Like, and you know, it's like sometimes I have to listen to the music and not like look at the cover ever because it will like
Yeah.
ruin the experience,
Yeah.
you know? There's some music like that. But yeah, so jump ahead from 2003 to 2013. We have The Next Day. What do you think, Frostbite?
Yeah, I remember. So I first started getting into rock. I'm only 22 years old. Uh, so it was around 2010, summer of 2010, when I first started getting into rock music. So and I was at 2013, I was still discovering stuff, and I knew I was getting into Bowie, I guess, around this time, and I knew he had retired, and it was kind of one of those like, well, dang, I missed out, and then he announced this album, and recorded it in secret. Nobody knew because everybody thought he'd been retired for a decade. And I remember the announcement for this album, and like it was huge when he made this announcement, and I remember, the first song that he released, the first single was "Where Are We Now," and it was like really, me and I think a lot of other people kind of caught off guard because it's a really ballad, slow. I feel like it's very reflective. It's kind of like him coming to terms with being older, almost kind of. And yeah, go ahead.
I just want when I listen to Where Are We Now, I can, maybe it's just me, I can like feel some nostalgia towards like late 70s Berlin era when he sings about some places in Berlin. I think it's that song, Where Are We? Yeah, I think it's that. I think, and when I listen to this album, I really hear some kind of nostalgia about heroes or this Berlin era.
Yeah, I get like I like when the song kind of starts to pick up in the middle and like the percussion just kind of starts this like marching thing.
Yeah.
And it does kind of have that nostalgic feel, and it does remind me a little bit of like Low in terms of like I get the same vibe from that song as I got from some of the songs on Low as well.
Yeah, I think so, and I guess the cover, like it's basically Heroes cover with The Next Day on. I think it's intentional, of course, and it's
like we were just talking about the album cover informing the music. Like you look at this and you think of Heroes, and that's in your mind while you're listening to this music. Were you done, Frostbite? Do you have other things to say?
I mean, just about. But going on, when the album come out, I had the album ordered and the deluxe put back, and I picked it up. I immediately loved this album. It's like we mentioned earlier at the start of the whole discussion, talking about your list of the order you put them in. You had The Next Day up high. Like I said, I don't think the tracks necessarily flow together very well. They're not very cohesive. But individually, I think most of the tracks, almost all of them, are just really great. There are a few that I don't visit very often, but a lot of these tracks I come back to. The Next Day, The Stars Are Out Tonight, Love Is Lost, Where Are We Now, Valentine's Day, Dancing Out in Space, How Does the Grass Grow, Set the World on Fire, You Feel So Lonely You Could Die. I think they're all over the place, but I think they're really great, and it's just a solid rock album. I think it's a lot of it's straightforward, I think, but especially for a comeback album, and being gone for 10 years, to be able to come back with such a strong album that at the time became his highest charting album in the US when this was released.
Yeah, Rickenbacker, I missed your thing before that said Reality had a different version of Rebel. I think is quite good, but he also said The Next Day. It's one of those cases where you can hear the music in your head just by looking at the cover, and I think that's true. It kind of gives that vibe. This is an album that I would like. I think should be a little shorter. Like I could probably, just my own preference, drop 3, maybe 4 tracks at most, and just kind of get it down to maybe like a high 30, low 40 minute range. Um, and I think that would have improved the album a lot. Would have made it a lot tighter, and probably would have made it a little bit better as well.
Mhm.
Because it just feels kind of long, not really bloated, but just like it's just kind of. I
I
don't
mean,
quite
like
know how to.
I could see dropping like "Dirty Boys" because that's one of my lesser favorite ones on it, and then like "If You Can See Me" is not one I really revisit.
I enjoyed "If You Can See Me." I could see dropping that one though. I personally didn't vibe a whole lot with "You'll Set the World on Fire" and "You Feel So Lonely You Could Die." Those just didn't quite strike me. But yeah, I think this album could be tightened just a tiny bit. What do you think, Shiftless?
This was kind of interesting for me because this was around the point where I was getting to Bowie and I realized his legacy, and so the album coming out right at around that time was very convenient.
Mm-hmm.
Getting into it was very strange because I didn't know anything about the Low or Heroes or the whole trilogy. Like after revisiting it and going through his whole sort of discography, it was kind of nice to have an album that felt indicative of his past, but it wasn't like enslaved to it or anyway. And it makes
Yeah.
it's weird because it feels very human in a way that to me Low and Heroes sometimes doesn't feel. Because I think it's probably because of the fact that he's so reflective and clearly taking a lot of his like mortality into question. So I really embrace that side of it.
Yeah, there's a sense of maturity and pedigree and experience and wisdom in this, which is I think why this feels like one of his best transitionary albums to me, because like Station to Station felt a little jarring. Scary Monsters, like I said, almost felt like unremarkable after the stuff that had come before it. But this feels like a much more confident statement, even though it's incredibly simple. What do you think, Rolf?
Um, I remember I listened to I actually listened to the next day after Blackstar, and it was I liked the next day, but it was it didn't give me such an impact like his early work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely. I may have said this in the video. It doesn't quite have its own personality. In a way, it's almost like bland, and that's not. It's not even like a criticism or a complaint. It's just like it's so simple and straightforward. It's some of the most palatable and almost mainstream appeal Bowie music I've heard from him so far. But and it's just like that's the thing is it doesn't, aside from his reflections, it doesn't necessarily feel like a Bowie album. Like I remember when the opening riff of Valentine's Day played and I was like, wow, this seems like almost too easy. Like this seems too not Bowie. Like because every time I hear a Bowie riff, it's just like a little bizarre, but it's like this is just really easy to listen to, and I was kind of surprised by that.
Well, I think the album it has lots of hints to his older work, but he kind of made it sound modern. A lot of it, and like you said, it's straightforward, which I think would probably was intentional for it to come across as palatable as it is.
Yeah, I think that definitely is the case. Rickenbacker says, and Blackstar does as well. I don't remember what that was in reference to. It was also his last transition album. That certainly is true.
Well,
yeah.
yeah.
So, anyone else have anything else on the next day before we move on?
I don't know. I'm coming to a point with everything we've stated as far as like his transitional albums, and like this, and accordance to some like Scary Monsters. Bowie going bland is never necessarily a bad thing because he knows how to make it work. It's just that he's such a idiosyncratic character that when we don't hear those certain like musical incantations that he does, it kind of feels more like, why are you being so pedestrian when you can be so like avant-garde with whatever you want to do with them?
Yeah, and then when we say that, he does something like Outside, and we're like, wait, too much.
Well,
exactly. We're either complaining about too little or too much, like kids.
Well, that's what I was just thinking as you were just saying that. I was kind of thinking that it's almost like when he puts out a straightforward album like this, it's almost like it's kind of like symbolic of like, yeah, here's this straightforward, pop appeal album that's very palatable, and he releases something like that to show that he can put out like a solid album like that if he wanted to or if he needs to. But meanwhile, he's working on something, and so then you have a follow up, like following the next day up with Blackstar.
Right. Rickenbacker says it has an interesting album artwork. Hey, let's just put a square over Heroes. Well, I think the same guy. Let me look real quick. The same guy who did the artwork for this did the artwork for Reality. Jonathan Barnbrook. So he definitely is a very forward-thinking designer, and apparently Bowie was willing to say like, sure, stick it on there. So yeah, 3 years later, we have Blackstar, final album, 25th album, nice round number. Good art rock, jazz rock kind of album. How many tracks? There's only 7, right? 7 tracks. Yeah, what do you think, Frostbite?
Yeah, this might be, being my other favorite Bowie album is Ziggy Stardust. This is up there with that for me. I think, this album, I had it pre-ordered, as soon as I could when it was announced. Had it the day it come out and listened to it, which was only 2 days before Bowie died. And so I remember, getting the album and listening to it the day that it come out, and I was online reading what other people were saying about the album and what I was thinking about it. And when it come out, it was so strange. Everybody was trying to figure out what the album was, about. Like, what is all? Because nobody knew he had been sick. Nobody knew that he was dying.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like 2 days later, after he dies, and then when you re-listen to the album, then you're picking up on all the things, and like some of it's not even clever symbolism. Like in one of the songs, he even says, "I'm dying to,"
Yeah.
I mean, like, and nobody was thinking of that because nobody knew that he was sick. But the whole album is pretty much him talking about his own death. And as you've mentioned, and Visconti talks about it, that Bowie recorded this album knowing that he was dying, so he kind of recorded this as a thank you to the fans.
I think it was Anthony Fantano said in his video, if I'm remembering correctly, in Girl Loves Me, he says, where did Monday go? And he died on a Sunday. So the album releases on the 8th, and then he dies 2 days later on a Sunday, and he doesn't make it to Monday. And it's man, what are the odds of that? It's like I don't know what he was talking about in Girl Loves Me. It's definitely one of the more experimental tracks, but yeah, and you hear
it's my favorite track on the album, though. I don't necessarily completely understand it either, but musically, I think it's probably my favorite one on the album.
Sure. Shiftless, what do you think?
It was definitely a very harrowing album because like I didn't listen to it upon the first release, so I knew Bowie had died, and I'd heard the sort of the rumors about like a lot of the album being very much centered on it around his death. So it really put a preconceived notion on it, and it's probably not one I go to too much just because the morbid feeling to me is a bit too pressing. It feels very much just in case. But I really come to like songs like Girl Loves Me, Lazarus, Blackstar. Like he very much aware of everything just slowly fading away, so he's just putting the best of himself out there, which I can really just I can't have anything more but respect for an artist that can do that so willfully.
Sure, definitely. What about you, Ralph?
To be honest, when Bowie died, I wasn't really into Bowie. I listened whole Bowie discography from when he died to summer 2016, and I remember I was in England first time aboard, and I bought Blackstar, and when I listened to it, it was one of my favorites back then of Bowie's. I don't. It's really hard for me to speak about it. It gives me this almost same feeling like Closer from Joy Division.
Hmm.
Maybe Closer is much more have this feeling stronger because the death of Ian was it's more mytholized you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think Blackstar is it's the best way he could go actually. It's the last gift from Bowie, and the I think it was Dollar Days or yeah, Girl Loves Me have this text in Natsat, the 1984 language,
Yeah.
and
Which is
mechanic.
actually it's actually really funny. You'll see in the video I'm wearing a shirt that says it's my Clockwork Orange shirt.
Oh yeah, and Clockwork Orange shirt. I understood the Clockwork Orange part because Clockwork Orange language is basically Russian.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm Polish, so I understood like half of it.
That's funny. It's funny. I when I first watched the movie and then read the book years ago, it's like I'm trying to like infer what he's saying just from the context of the sentences, but I can't quite get every single word. But yeah, I didn't even pick up on the NADSAT stuff in that song. I need to go back and look at the lyrics, but apparently that's a thing.
To be honest, I don't remember that much Natsat. I remember mostly Clockwork Orange. But from what I've read, there is some parts in Natsat.
So yeah, Rickenbacker says Dollar Days has a really fascinating chord progression during the verses. Yeah, so this album, it's interesting seeing what you said about Closer, and it's kind of fascinating to have like this album be someone dying of natural, quote unquote, natural causes, and Closer, it's like I'd argue Closer is like way darker and almost way more heavier to listen to because it's a suicide that comes on the brink of that. You know.
To be honest, I'm Joy Division fanatic, and I believe Closer it's just my opinion. It's like the best album ever. It's like the most artistic thing I've ever heard.
I really like Closer. I don't know if it's better. I think it's slightly better than Unknown Pleasures, but I enjoy it way more than Unknown Pleasures.
I think the style of Closer is definitely more mature. I would say it's definitely you can feel they are. You can feel it's something like more than just basically Unknown Pleasures is little. From what I've read, Sumner and Hooky just wanted to make a little punkish album, and it was something bigger. But Closer is like Everest compared to Unknown Pleasures, and I really believe Ian was the best poet since Haitz. Yeah.
Yeah, and another great example of the album cover really informing the music.
Oh yeah, I can just look at the cover of Closer and you just can hear the Atrocity exhibition, for example, starting. When you look at the cover, you just know
the opening piano chords of The Eternal, and it's right there in your head. But yeah, with Blackstar, like I said in the video, it's really interesting to kind of have the first 3 to 4 to 5 songs be a little heavier, and like Blackstar is probably one of the heaviest songs. Lazarus was kind of a nice low-key break. Girl Loves Me is bizarre and crazy, and then like Dollar Days and I Can't Give Everything Away is a kind of nice low-key fade out. It's a little, I guess, brighter, you could say. Yeah, it's again a unique, unexpected statement from a very unique and unexpected artist, and it's another one that I'm still trying to like kind of figure out how to stomach, and in a way it's just that's all just kind of part of Bowie as a whole. It's not even necessarily the music, it's just this guy and what he wanted to say and what he was feeling and going through. But yeah, really solid album.
I thought, and I was surprised that I thought you would have Blackstar higher. I thought it would be one that you would have probably, I thought it was going to be one you clicked with right away, honestly, when I was going through your reactions. I connected a lot with Blackstar just because I become such a huge Bowie fan. Like, and I'll say it that you know, when I woke up that morning to see that he had died, this is like the one and only, you know, celebrity death that I actually got emotional over. Like, I actually cried when Bowie died, and so like I connected a lot with that. So I guess for for me, it's just a very emotional album. And the video for Lazarus, I don't know if you watched the music video, but the music video for that's very powerful, I think, too.
I haven't. I need to though. Here's a little like after going through this discussion and throwing Blackstar in just randomly. Here's a little bit of a better list, I think, than the one I posted before. That's probably a little more accurate to how I feel. Yeah, it was pretty solid, pretty solid. So that's all of the albums I reacted to. If you guys want to talk briefly about some of the ones I will be reacting to, first one will be Diamond Dogs. This was 74. This was right after Aladdin Sane. I'm not going to do pinups.
No, I think it's after.
Like, yeah. I'm saying the ones that I had listened to. I had listened to Aladdin Sane. I'm not doing pinups. Yeah. So Ziggy Stardust, Aladdin Sane, and then skipping pinups, and then we'll do Diamond Dogs at some point. This has been one, like, of all the ones that I'm glossing over, this is the one that everyone's like, how could you have skipped this? And it's like, I want to listen to music other than Bowie, please. So
I was gonna say you should take some time doing that before you get more into it.
Yeah. So what do you guys think about Diamond Dogs, Frostbite?
I think it's really good. I think it's not as high of a favorite for me as it is for a lot of Bowie fans. But looking at the track list, there's quite a few songs that I come back to. I mean, obviously, Rebel's the big one. Rock and Roll With Me is one that I found that I like listening to, and then Sweet Thing I like, and and as Candidate's really good. Diamond Dogs is solid, but it's probably not even one of my favorite ones. The title.
Interesting. What about you, Shiftless?
I mean, it's one that I'd like just on a couple of the tracks, because I feel like it's still him trying to put his songwriting in a different context, but it's clear that it's not as focused or really out there as the previous albums. But it's fun. I really appreciate Rebel, Diamond Dogs, and 1984 a bunch. It's just like I've grown to really like more Young Americans because I really like the implication of soul he's trying to put there, because he clearly has a love for it that I think was very left field for an artist of his caliber.
Sure. What about you, Rolf?
When I first listened to it, I absolutely loved it. But when I look at this album now, I think it's like Bowie making one tiny step outside Ziggy persona and this art style, let's say. I like Diamond Dogs quite a lot, but it's I to be honest, I haven't listened to it from. I think I listened to it last time 2 years ago or maybe 3. Yeah, so I didn't really wanted to go back to this album. But I've got 2 copies of it, so I don't know. I didn't listen to it.
Rickenbacker says, I love it. Diamond Dogs is really good. Title track, Rebel, Rock and Roll With Me are the bright gems of the album, and it grew on them really fast. Yeah, I'm really intrigued by it just because it seems to be kind of part of that glam trilogy, I guess you could say. Like, so it's like I've heard Ziggy, I've heard Aladdin. It's like Diamond Dogs seems to be kind of like the end of that. So I'm really intrigued to go check that one out at some point in the future too.
I would say Diamond Dogs, it's like Lodger of Ziggy trilogy. It's like you can feel it, but you can also feel it's Bowie's going to another direction from Ziggy era a little.
Okay, cool. Young Americans, Frostbite. What do you think about that one?
I think this one's one that I just pick a few tracks up of that I really like. Instead of the album as a whole, Young Americans title track, and Fascination I like.
Ooh, there's an Across the Universe cover. I didn't realize that.
Well, yeah, that's what I was. That's one I started listening to probably in the last couple months. Actually, that I like. That's another example of one of him taking a song that everybody knows, but changing it up enough to make it his own. But then Fame's really the standout track on this album, I think. And that one was co-written with John Lennon. So, and it's really it's a really funky but it's still got a strong guitar riff in it. I really love that song. It's a really great song.
Now I'm intrigued. Shiftless, you said you like this one, right? This album?
Yeah, like I like a lot of the vibe of this album. Like a lot. To me, the songs aren't necessarily all the more constructed, but it really follows the sort of funk template of the song of really trying to capture a vibe, a feeling, and play it out to see where it ends.
Mm-hmm.
But in the cases of something like Young Americans, that's a game, like you can really still hear his sense of hooks, his sense of like composition being played out. Though I really appreciate where he did stuff, where he took that stuff with Station to Station, because it's way more, I think, Bowie centrally. But this is a good like showcase of where he could go if he doesn't just follow the rock lane.
Sure. Rolf, what do you think about Young Americans?
When I first listened to it, I didn't like it at all. But I then listen. I mean, I liked the Young Americans track and Fame, but rest not so much. And I listened to it again and then again because I was just trying to find what people actually liked about this album. And I listened to it again and again, and I think it's some kind of Stockholm syndrome when I just started to like it after like 50th listen. It's not my favorite, definitely. It's I'm not a soul guy, let's say. I think Station to Station is more my style, but it's something. It's fun. It's fun to listen, definitely. But I don't go back to it that much.
All right, interesting. Rickenbacker says, I also think Space Oddity isn't a bad album.
It's definitely better than Self-Titled, that's for sure.
So we talked briefly about Let's Dance. That's probably another one I'll do. Does anyone have anything else to add?
I would just say for that, because I know you said you hadn't heard China Girl, and I know you were talking about wanting to go back after listening to the Bowie and go back to the time period and listen to The Idiot and there's a couple of Iggy Pop albums that Bowie wrote with him and recorded with him. And so if you do that, you can compare because they wrote China Girl and Iggy Pop recorded it first.
I'm seeing that now. It was on The Idiot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then David Bowie went back and recorded it for Let's Dance, and that might be my favorite song on Let's Dance. And I would also say Cat People might be the best song that he put out in the 80s, in my opinion. But
with a name like Cat People, where can you go wrong?
But I think the version of Cat People that's on the soundtrack for the movie is different than this album version. And the soundtrack version is the better version, though.
I had no idea there was a movie called Cat People. 1982 erotic horror film. Wow, there you go. Perfect.
I watched it solely because of the Bowie connection, and it's a pretty bad movie. It's a pretty bad.
The Man Who Fell to Earth.
Oh yeah, The Man Who Fell on Earth. I remember I watched it only because there was Bowie on it, and I never ended watching it. I just in the middle.
I liked the movie. It was just hard to follow the story.
I heard a lot of that.
Yeah. So, of the I want to try to pick maybe another one from his kind of late era. So we have like Earthling Hours, Heathen Reality. Are there any which one of those would be the best pick for me to do? Do you think?
I would say I would vote for Heathen.
Yeah, from what I've heard, it's the best from this era.
Heathen
Heathen or Reality.
Yeah. I mean, I really like both of them, and for a long time, I probably would have said that I liked Reality better, but Heathen is it feels like a little, I don't know, not necessarily darker or heavier than Reality, but Reality seems very light and kind of, and Heathen's got a little bit more of an edge to it. So I think Heathen's slightly the better album.
Okay.
Afraid of Americans is on Earthlink, right?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Interesting. Okay, cool. All right. Well, I think that pretty much finishes it. Almost a 2-hour discussion. I don't know how much I'll edit this down, but yeah, I hope you viewers on YouTube enjoyed this, and thank you guys for joining me. This was a lot of fun. Hope you liked it.
It was really fun.
Hopefully, I say we do it again after the Morrissey videos.
Yeah, I'm down to
Morrissey
do this.
videos.
I'm down to do this regularly for like when I go through an entire band or artist, and whoever is like a fan or willing to discuss, to be like, let's take a look back and kind of talk about it. Maybe not for like, if I do like just a couple albums, but if I do enough, then I think it might warrant a video like this. So, but yeah, thank you guys for joining me.
Oh yes, anytime.
Anytime.
So there's the retrospective. It's probably going to be a really long video, but I hope you guys liked that. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to the chat between all of us. And if you guys want to partake in some of this stuff and some of the chatting going on our Discord, you can join. Link is in the description. But yeah, so coming up, we have the poll video, or the poll album, which will probably be Marquee Moon. It looks like that's winning right now. So stay tuned for that. And then after that, we're doing Morrissey. And if you guys want to be in the Morrissey discussion, head on over to the Discord. That's all I got for you guys. Thank you. Godspeed.